the Pat Mayo Experience.
Pat Mayo Experience. Pat Mayo Experience. Pat Mayo Experience. Experience.
Hello and welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience. I am Garion Thorne, the world's #1 Pat Mayo impersonator. Pat, right now, off on paternity leave. We wish Pat and his lovely wife the best as they bring their bundle of joy into the world. But really, aside from the baby, good news all around. Because Pat, you don't want Pat here for baseball. You really, really don't. Who you do want here for baseball is the Athletic and Fantrax's Chris Meaney. Chris, how's it going, man?
It's going great. Yeah. You know, Pat's jokes he talks about, he'll admit it. He's just like, I know nothing about baseball. I just want to pick apart your rankings.
The craziest part is he used to really know
Yes,
baseball.
he really did. Yeah. I mean, he's still going to have, I'm sure, his Pat Mayo
he'll have his
fantasy
league
with 15 people, and he'll draft a team, and he'll flirt with a top spot in the standings. He'll be there all year. But
the problem with it is now, I think this happens with both of us. We see it from the other side. Like, I remember the first year we did the Fantasy Baseball League, FNTSY Fantasy Baseball League, within the office there. Like, everyone was sniping Pat's sleepers.
Yeah.
And I've noticed the last couple years when I'm in that draft room, he's taking my sleepers.
Yeah.
And it's really annoying. Like, the entire queue I have, it's like, oh, gone, gone. Why did I tell Pat about that guy?
And I'm sure that'll happen with you and I when we get drafting. We'll steal each other's sleepers. But yeah, man, thanks for having me. Congratulations to Pat and his new family member. And yeah, it's baseball time, man. Sleepers, like, so much is going to change. Like, I've already noticed, Garion, from writing a couple articles of sleepers, just, you know, and you know, sleepers are, it's a funny term. It's a clickbait thing.
Yeah. I mean, let's call it what this is. We're really talking about undervalued players.
That's what it's all about. Value is what it's all about. And, you know, we're not necessarily looking for breakout campaigns, but I've already noticed, you know, from a week or, 14 days that guys have already moved up the draft board from maybe they're not value anymore. Like, I'm sure we're going to do a couple of these guys like come March.
Yeah.
Maybe they won't be as valuable as they are right now, but they're on my radar.
Well, one thing that I did that was sort of interesting and speaks to your point is we each picked out 5 guys, 5 pitchers that we like to be undervalued or sleepers, if you prefer the term, this season. And I kind of compared their Fantrax ADP, which is a more public-based format, versus their NFBC ADP. And a lot of the guys we like because their values in the public setting not so much valuable in the professional fantasy baseball players setting.
Maybe we're onto something then.
Maybe we are. I like the validation. Yes. Before we get into that, though, do want to remind people that if you want to get into a draw for some valuable DK bucks, 20 DK bucks, I believe, first, like this video. Then, in the comment section below, leave your DK handle. Obviously, we got to know who you are to give you the money. And tell us who your favorite starting pitcher sleeper for the 2019 fantasy baseball season is. So once again, like the video, in the comment section, your favorite sleeper and your DK handle. Will put you in a draw. Maybe you'll walk away with 20 DK dollars. But yeah, I kind of like it when I see the NFBC people are onto something. It validates the opinion just a little bit.
Absolutely.
So we're just going to kind of go from the top here. The highest ADP sleepers we like, all the way down to guys who you probably shouldn't even think about drafting.
I got a couple that you probably shouldn't think about drafting.
But maybe just because I think one thing that I find to be very valuable, especially if you're someone who enjoys season-long baseball, and if you're watching this video, you probably also enjoy playing on DraftKings.
Absolutely, yeah. And
I find early on in the season, there are guys who I know I like. Maybe I'm not going to draft them in a 12-man league. But when the DK season starts, and they're sitting down there at like $4,500 in a nice matchup, and people are like, what? Who's this guy? And you're like, oh, I kind of liked him.
Yeah.
So there's always some value to be found early in the season. I find, especially DK, maybe a little DK Sportsbook action too.
Yes,
there's some weird lines in April, and I really like playing around with those. So sleepers are kind of fun for that too. But one guy, you had him on your list. I was going to put him on my list because, man, we talk about separation of ERA and FIP. Shane Bieber might have been one of the unluckiest pitchers in baseball last season. Aside from the fact, very lucky in that he got called up to make his professional debut.
Yes.
Good for you, Shane Bieber. That's fun. Everyone likes that. But super high BABIP, super low strand rate. Like, you'd have to think this guy just gets lucky this season.
Yeah, out of all the pitchers, actually, with 110 innings, now he had 114. He had the second biggest gap between ERA and FIP, and his ERA was 4.55, and his FIP was 3.23. Now, you mentioned the BABIP. It was high, 356, and he has a hard hit rate, which was, I think, around 44%.
Left-handers, too. It was
left-handers
demolished
him. So there are a little bit of red flags and concerns. You think maybe there's going to be, the ERA will slightly come down. I'm not 100% a believer on that. I don't know for sure if he's going to.
You're not a believer?
Nice. I like that. Oh, Biebs. I'm not a Bieber. Listen, he's got great command. And with the command, again, there's some concern. Maybe that's why everyone was hitting him so hard.
Yeah. There's a little like
anybody.
Remember when Phil Hughes had that breakout season? Yeah. And it was like, whoa,
it's like wasn't it like a 90% contact rate with him?
Something like that. He had a 12-1 strikeout to walk ratio. It was a Major League Baseball record. And then the next season they were like, hey Phil, maybe don't throw every pitch right down the middle of the plate.
Yeah, don't throw. And I'm sure that's what they're telling him in Cleveland too. Like, listen, like you have great command, you're all over the strike zone,
also,
but you need
better,
to mix
better
it up just
stuff
a little
than Phil
bit.
Hughes,
yeah, better stuff.
That's the thing.
I mean, his contact rate was actually 75.5%, which is pretty solid. I mean, it's great. 11.4 swinging strike percentage, also solid. But I mean, if you look at the walks, I mean, 4% walk rate. And for me, when I was looking at him last year, I was actually working out west in the oil patch in old Regina, Saskatchewan. I was digging up some research on Bieber, and I was like, I'm going to play him on DraftKings because I noticed the call up, and I said, well, I want to play this guy. I mean, Cleveland, he's going up against Minnesota. They can strike some guys. They have a lot of guys who swing and miss.
Yep.
And I looked at his minor league numbers: 298 innings in the minors, 22 walks.
Yeah.
22 walks in 298. And I know people, the only walking they're doing in the minor leagues, we've joked about this before, is to the bus.
Well, there's the old saying that it's generally for like Dominican players, but because back in the day Vladdy is maybe the greatest example of this.
Yeah.
And it was, you don't walk off the island, man. They're not looking at your on base percentage when the scouts come over. They're seeing who can hit the ball 450 feet. So minors.
And I'm rocking the Vladdy T for you, the
there
Guerrero. Your boy Vlad Guerrero Jr. is going to be phenomenal.
Who's that? I haven't heard of him.
Yeah, and man, we should get into him later of where he's going.
Unfortunately, can't be a sleeper.
Unfortunately, can't be a sleeper because everybody is in on him. But I mean, it limits the walks. 232 strikeouts, 22 walks, and 300 innings in the minor leagues, and that carried over 1.81 walks per nine in the majors. So the strikeout ratio 24%, the walk ratio 4%, and really just because of his command and the fact that he wasn't walking guys. He got deep into ball games, and I think it's an underrated stat as well. Like 17 of his 19 starts, he pitched into the sixth inning. Is solid, right?
Yeah.
So we talked before when we were looking at ADPs. The division that he plays in is phenomenal. Like that's just a small little part of why I like him. The fact that he's going to play the White Sox, and the Twins have got a revamped lineup, but the Royals.
But that was, talk about using him on DK. Like I think it was
super cheap, and strikeouts
was like
there.
Every time Carlos Carrasco pitched last season, I was just like, well, I probably got to take a look at Carrasco. He's playing the Royals again. Like so it's a great division to pitch in.
So Garion, when I started looking him up 3 weeks ago, he was pitcher 52 on Fantrax, and right now he's pitcher 46.
Yeah, he's gonna.
So
jump.
he continues to jump up, and I think he does have maybe top 35, 40 upside. But if he's going to continue, like we're leading with him, but if he's going to continue, like come March, if he's pitcher 40.
Little too.
That may be a little bit too much, but I do see some positive regression from him. I like the command that he has, and maybe he learns to pitch a little bit outside of the strikeout zone. But I think he's locked into a role.
Yeah.
I think he's deserving of a role, maybe as the pitcher 3 or 4, whether you like Clevenger or not. I think he's a fine pitcher to
like
target.
you said though. He's someone who he has good control. Yes. But something you can do with someone who has pristine control, they're malleable. Like, you're right. As a pitching coach, you can say, like, okay, look, you were just getting too much of the plate last season. Control still control if you want him to throw balls. Like, he can do stuff. He can execute game plans, and he's got secondary pitches. Like you mentioned, he's above an 11% swinging strike rate last year.
Yeah, that's fine. That's solid.
He can generate swings and misses outside of the strike zone. Not an overly high swing rate. He was only getting batters to swing outside the zone like 30% of the time.
Yeah.
That's not phenomenal,
No.
but it's not bad.
Yeah,
so
that's a concern to me. And the hard hit rate is, and you mentioned lefties, like that. Those are
Yeah.
all some red flags. But again, we're talking about pitchers who are going outside the top, like ADP 174. Like this
Yeah.
is somebody that you can take as, you know, SP4 perhaps, and somebody that I think could be, you know, a 3 for you.
And I think you're right, though. I think it's good you bring up that he does have the characteristics of someone who might get too talked up and get himself out of sleeper range into
That's
someone
my
who's maybe
concern right now with
overvalued.
him.
So
Yeah.
definitely something to watch with him. My first guy is Zack Godley, who just had a bad season last year. And, you know, we talk about Cleveland and them kind of blowing it up and possibly not being great this season. I don't think Arizona's going to be very good.
No.
So win expectancy could be tough. And that's actually something kind of strange with Godley. Godley actually led all Arizona pitchers in run support last season. Even though he had a 4.74 ERA, he still had 15 wins. And like, if as a point of comparison, Patrick Corbin was amazing last season.
He really was.
Only had 11 wins. Like, they were sporadic with how they scored runs, and it seemed like Godley got a lot of them. So we're already talking about someone who leaned heavily on wins last season, and the lineup got exceedingly worse.
Yeah.
So that's obviously a red flag, but Godley still has a lot of the attributes that I look for in a pitcher that I like. And he's someone who right now is going 224 on Fantrax, and surprisingly, he's going 250 in NFBC.
Oh, wow.
So they've done
It's a little bit later there.
71 drafts, I think it was, up to January 19th. 250.9 is his ADP. So maybe some of the sharps are seeing those red flags a little bit more clearly. A bright cherry red, and I'm seeing it as like a sort of washed out red. But second half of the season, 3.16 FIP, 9.49 K per nine. His walk rate, walks are the big thing in the first half. That fell from 11.2% to 8.8%. And he had the lowest qualified strand rate in the National League at just 67.5%. And it's one thing to have a low strand rate. You can kind of like shake that off as, you know, maybe he does get choked with runners on base. Maybe his control does get a little wonky with guys on second and third. But at the same time, when your strikeout rate is as high as it is for Godley, like second half he was hovering around 25%. Your strand rate shouldn't be that low.
No, it should. 25% is solid.
Yeah,
it's a great mark for a guy who's
outside the
going
250 in NFBC.
You're not going to get a lot of pitchers outside, you know, 250, 230 that can give you a strike rate like that. And he keeps the ball on the ground, does he not?
Keeps the ball on the ground. That went down a little bit this season, but it was still 48%.
Yeah, that's still fine.
His curveball is deadly. Like again, there are certain things for sleepers. I feel like there's a little mini checklist I have, which is like strikeout rate, yes or no, ground ball rate, yes or no. Does he have like a pitch? He checks all those boxes. I understand there's some red flags, but it's also, we're going to talk about a couple guys. Actually, the next guy we're going to talk about hasn't really done anything at the major league level. And I don't have a problem with that because I think so much of fantasy is projecting the unknown, but it's not as if Godley is someone who's never been a fantasy baseball contributor.
Yeah,
We're two seasons removed from him being a breakout star in fantasy baseball. So I don't think that just goes away.
No, and I was in on him last year, like you were,
Yeah.
and because of the down year, people are not going to be in on him, and that doesn't mean I'm not going to be in on him this year. Like that makes me like him a little bit more. That I don't have to pay that price that I paid last year for the breakout or for him to bounce back. So yeah, I think that's a solid candidate for sure. Again, you get that strikeout percentage of somebody who's that you can get for free. It's a positive.
Let's talk about Josh James, or as he's known on Fangraphs, Joshua James.
Joshua.
So the ADP is higher than you might expect for someone who's only
It really
thrown,
is actually. He's got 23
career innings.
innings and 3 starts.
But huge strikeout rate.
Huge.
Definitely comes with a pedigree. And at this point, you know, we attribute certain characteristics to like particular farm systems. It seems like the Astros know how to breed these massive men who strike batters out.
Yeah.
So that's an organizational trait. So I'll give them some credit for that. I think the thing that I like most, strangely enough, about Josh James, and I'm sure this is why you have him as a sleeper, is you would think for a team that had 9 starting pitchers last season,
Yeah.
that we'd be like, oh, how is this guy going to find his way into the rotation? Seems like he is. Like McCullers is done for the year.
Yeah,
Seems like
Tommy
Colin
John.
McHugh is going to be back in the starting rotation.
Yeah,
like,
well, he certainly wants to. I think
Yeah,
he
he
voiced his
definitely
opinion on
wants to.
Twitter about
Yep.
how he should be a starter.
Yep.
But that's not a lock. But Keuchel is gone.
Keuchel's
Charlie
gone.
Morton is gone
Yep.
from that team. Obviously Verlander and Garrett Cole are going to lead that rotation, but there's a spot for him inside that rotation. Look, I saw his very first, so he made 6 appearances. He had 3 starts, and I saw his very first start. It came against the Angels. Now he walked 3 guys and he gave up 3 runs, but he only allowed 3 hits and he struck out 9 guys. And honestly, all of his walks came in that first inning, and I just want to chalk it up to a kid who had some nerves.
Yeah.
He hits 100 on the gun. His average fastball is 97, but he hits 100 on the gun. He's got 3 pitches that are very solid, but he was just the adrenaline rush. He was not hitting the plate at all, and I watched the rest of his outings, and I was just very impressed. Now, obviously, we're dealing with a very small sample size here at 23 innings, but 14.4 swinging strike percentage, 68.9 contact percentage. Is somebody in the minor leagues that in AA in 21 innings had 38 strikeouts rather. In 92 innings in AAA, he had 133. This guy can strike guys out. He's very powerful, and we're talking about a guy who has a second and a third pitch. With Godley. We're seeing it here with Josh James. So there are some guys inside their system that could potentially move up and maybe take a job, but I think that he's locked into a role right away. So, I mean, Steamer has him as his strikeout percentage being at 26% and flirting with a 12 K per 9.
Yeah.
I mean, that's phenomenal stuff. I know it's a very small sample size here, but I think he has the pitches and the strikeout percentage, a great defense behind him, a great offense.
Yeah, win expectancy is high.
Yeah, it's super huge. I mean, SP 55 is actually pretty. I was taken back by that because when I was first looking at some pitchers who could, pop up this season, I thought, oh, maybe this guy will be in the 60s.
Yeah,
maybe it'd be like 250 ADP. But people are on him.
Any fear, and this is obviously something we can't really know. Any fear that maybe late in the season we see like the Astros put a cap?
There could be
because
that could happen.
Let's see, he threw 130 innings across 3 levels last season,
which is not a lot. So
I could see them having like a 20 game lead in the American League West in August, just being like, we're gonna shut them down to the playoffs.
Yeah, and there is
move into the bullpen maybe.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that because, like I said, the 6 appearances and 3 starts. There is a fear that in the second half, or maybe even if he struggles, that he goes back into a bullpen role. Like that's definitely a possibility. But again, I still think, for where he's going, I think the upside, lies in maybe in the first couple of months. You see, hey, this has panned out a little bit, but something you'll probably want to have in the back of your mind that there is a chance that maybe he does go to the bullpen.
But I think the interesting thing, even if he does go to the bullpen, let's say it happens early, and let's say it's not an innings cap thing. That's not ideal, obviously, but we're not that far removed. And I think there's still a little inefficiency, especially in deeper leagues, with instead of streaming like SP 95, there's some value in just sticking some middle relievers.
We've had this
conversation a lot.
I love that strategy.
Like, why couldn't this guy be Chris Davinsky?
Yeah.
So I'm not again, that's not ideal,
right? But
we're talking about someone who is generally going outside the top 200. Sure, maybe it goes wrong, but even if it goes wrong, he can still be useful.
Yeah.
So I'm
I don't want to call him out of, but for him as somebody who's we had these conversations, that was a guy instead of streaming James Shields.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too. Like I'm
Adam
going through.
Ottavino was a guy who could get me 8 to 9 strikeouts a week.
Yeah. And I'm like, obviously James is kind of like in a tier above these particular players, but on Fantrax, the next crop of pitchers, it's like Joey Lucchesi, Yuli Chassin, Steven Matz, Zack Godley.
Yeah.
But like, am I really like, oh, I can't draft Josh James. I got to make sure Steven Matz is in my team this year.
Exactly.
Like, no, it's fine. This is when you can start taking risks, which is the beauty of sleeping.
I just feel like he should certainly be on everybody's radar as somebody that I think is, up and coming. And, again, a couple pitches and strikeouts is what I'm all about in this range. That's what I'm looking for.
Well, let's plop kind of 2 guys together because they're similar circumstances, although I think they're maybe trending in opposite directions. Although I don't want to really take anything away from Michael Pineda because I have drank the Michael Pineda Kool-Aid many a time. We all have. But Jimmy Nelson, Michael Pineda, both guys did not pitch in the majors in 2018. Pineda coming off of 2 seasons where the FIP looked great. He didn't walk anybody. The strikeouts were good, but somehow the ERA was 4.5.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, it's sort of like Chris Archer is kind of getting to this place for me where I'm like, look, man, all the peripherals look great, but you have to freaking do it.
Yeah.
Like 1 season, I need your ERA and your FIP to match.
Yes.
Like it just has to happen at some point because for as much as I love FIP, I don't get graded on FIP in my 5x5 leagues.
No, you don't.
So Pineda was kind of reaching that territory for me, but all the underlying statistics say that he should have been better than he was. Oh, there's a wrinkle with the fact that it's not just Tommy John, but then he also like tore his meniscus.
Yep.
So that's
that
worrisome.
slowed his recovery down last year.
But then there's Jimmy Nelson, who was really on his way to being like...
He was unreal before that shoulder injury.
Yeah, like I think last season, obviously not to the extent that it happened this season, but there were 2 guys who kind of like rocketed up from being, you know, prospect level guys to being fringe top 30 pitchers last year. And it was... we've already mentioned. Well, we didn't mention Sean Manaea.
Manaea.
Sean Manaea.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a disappointing run.
Manaea. These guys change their name all the time.
Interesting.
Yeah, I saw that on A's broadcast.
And then we had Patrick Corbin.
Yep.
Who was having this sort of breakout second half. I think Nelson would have been in that mix had he been healthy because the numbers, second half of 2017, 66 innings, so small sample, granted, 2.83 FIP, 29.4% strikeout rate, 51.2% ground ball rate. To put that in perspective, last season, among pitchers who threw 100 innings, and we can even bring down the sort of like the ratios they have to get to, the benchmarks, 50% ground ball rate, 25% strikeout rate. That's all we need. There were only 3 guys who did it. Aaron Nola, Lance McCullers, who you can't draft this season, and Walker Buehler. Aaron Nola and Walker Buehler basically top 40 locks.
Yeah.
And Jimmy Nelson is going outside the top 250.
Wow.
Like, I get it. It's scary. He's coming back from a major shoulder injury, but
at that
supposed
point,
to be fine.
Yeah, again, at that point, like a lot of these guys that we're going to talk about and we'll go through hitters too is they've had down years or injuries have slowed them down or an injury. And that's how you get value the next season. That's exactly it.
Yeah, we're not going to be painting a picture of like, oh, this guy's perfect in every way. He's
we're not talking about Jimmy Nelson being a top 20, top 30 pitcher, but I remember that season absolutely. And he was a fantasy stud. He was somebody that, wasn't even really drafted, was picked up off waivers. And the ground ball rate inside that park, again, the strikeout percentage, I'm in on him too. I'm not sour at all on the shoulder injury. Obviously, that is a red flag, but that's been a long time, like since he suffered that injury. So what's his ADP?
Right now it's 268 on Fantrax and actually 266.6 on NFBC. But I will say I think he's a guy
that's
who
like SB70.
Yeah, as soon as he throws a spring start and looks fine, I think the ADP is going to shoot up. So like you said before, if you're someone who does do these early drafts, like this is the time to really hop on the Jimmy
I drafted
train.
him in a best ball league, was like round 25 or something.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Pineda, I would say people...
Pineda's
the ADP would tell you people think less.
But, he's not even on anybody's... And like,
but he's free. He's free.
And I'll say this, like, you're playing in a 12-team league, you're not drafting.
No.
You're not drafting him. You're probably not even drafting him in a 14-team league, but you're keeping an eye on him. This is somebody that I'll keep an eye on through spring. I want to see him put together some starts. You mentioned the knee injury slowed him down. We haven't even seen him pitch in a Twins uniform yet.
Yeah.
I mean, he hasn't. And
I think a lot of people probably don't know he pitches for the Twins.
Right. He signed a 2-year contract with them, and this is the final year of the deal. I mean, he had the Tommy John surgery.
Contract year, Derek.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Here we go. But, the last time we saw him, and granted, it was a long time ago, it was 2016, but he did have a 10.6 K per 9, was the 5th best mark in baseball. It was number 1 in the American League. What got him into problems when you're talking about FIP and ERA is he allowed 68 home runs in a 3-year span playing with the Yankees is what killed him. But the strikeout ratio, the strikeout minus walk ratio, 20.2, 20.4, 17.3. Those are elite numbers in my opinion for somebody who's going as SP 116.
Yeah.
And 428 on Fantrax. I mean, over 680 career innings. He's got a 9.5 K per 9. 2.08 walks per nine, 24 strikeout percentage. Like those are good numbers. He's a complete wild card. He's going to pop up on the DL. Guaranteed he's probably going to pop up on the DL. But he's going to have those starts. And we're talking DraftKings. I mean, he's going to be a guy that we'll probably talk about at some point this season as a guy who can flirt with double-digit strikeouts in a start.
I mean, look, all you can ask for outside the top, I would even say 300, is upside. And Michael Pineda, there's no one who can look at the numbers he's put up in his career. There's no one who can say he doesn't have upside this season. Are there impediments to him reaching it? Sure. Yeah. But yeah, it's a better ballpark.
Oh, it's a much better ballpark for him.
We're now at the point where we've seen many guys come back from these types of injuries. And it's not as if he didn't completely miss last season. Did throw 12 innings in the minors. Like that's not much, but he got back on a mound. He's physically able to pitch. Yeah. We know that.
All signs point to him being ready opening day. Yeah. It's like probably their third starter.
Yeah. They need pitching. Yeah. They need pitching. So look, like just for some kind of like context, like I was going to talk about Robbie Erlin as my like every year I signed a contract with the devil. I have to talk about one awful San Diego Padre pitcher that for some reason I'm going to rope myself into believing. Last year was Clayton Kershaw, or sorry, not Clayton Kershaw, Clayton Richard. Two very different people.
I had Lamet too last year, Tommy John.
Clayton Richard now member of the Toronto Blue Jays, which makes me not good for my irrational love of Clayton Richard. So Robbie Erlin going like pick 500. Yeah. You really don't have to think about Robbie Erlin that much. The one thing I just wanted to point out, lowest walk rate of any pitcher in baseball last season. With over 90 innings thrown. He's someone who maybe we don't talk about whip a lot because it just kind of happens. Yeah. Like good pitchers have good whips.
Sure.
But, you know, we often find like, oh, this guy could be cheap strikeouts late in the draft. Maybe you take a pitcher who's going to make a start every 5 days for a really good team. He could be a wins guy.
Yeah.
Robbie Erlin could maybe be your whip guy. I mean, he's not coming out of nowhere. He was at one point in his career a highly touted prospect. And he showed signs of life last season. Now, he was really good as a reliever, and then they put him in the rotation, and he wasn't so good. No. He had a 6.23 ERA as a starter, 2.05 ERA as a reliever, but he had a 3.87 FIP as a starter because 53.7% strand rate, 349 BAPIP. As a starter.
Strand rate,
53% strand rate. Now
it's pretty low.
I can't use the Godley defense and say like he's someone who has a high strikeout rate. He doesn't. No. That's not his thing. He's probably like 7 strikeouts per 9. That's what he's good for. But the strikeout to walk ratio is going to be like 7-1, 8-1, somewhere in that territory. His career whip is 1.14, which is really good.
Yeah, that is solid.
And to get that guy past pick 500, like again, you're not drafting him, but if someone goes down, if you need a spot start. Yeah.
And, you know, you're playing in deep leagues, too. Like, there's a lot of people out there who are playing in deep leagues, like 30 rounds deep. And if you're going to get one of those pitchers off the, 2 of the top 15 pitchers with great strikeout ratios, is someone, and you're taking some shots in the middle of your round with, some guys that we're talking about. And then later on, get a guy who doesn't walk anyone that could help your ratios. I think we'll talk about that when we go to hitters.
Yeah.
When I bring up a catcher.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, that's stabilizing your ratios.
Yeah. So I think he's, again, not someone you have to pay a whole lot of attention to, but if you're thinking about whip and maybe guys who could help your whip late, he's someone who I've kind of pinpointed. Let's talk about, I feel like every year we either talk about Kevin Gausman or Dylan Bundy. They're at least not teammates anymore.
Right. Bundy's so interesting because he strikes so many guys out, but his fly ball rate is crazy and he just gives up a home run like every other day. Like he's hard for me to like. I want to sometimes give him like he wasn't striking out anybody early on in his career. Nope. No one. And then all of a sudden he was striking out everybody. And then, but he just gives up so many bombs.
He is like this power slider that's really good. And for a while, it at least made sense. Like he struggled with lefties because he couldn't throw the slider to lefties. Mm-hmm. So I got that. Then last season, he started struggling with righties and lefties. And it's like, I can't stand for you anymore if you're just going to be bad to every single split. Gausman, though.
Gausman's interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, I remember writing about him last season, and I thought the funniest thing was he always starts slow, like always. And he's actually someone who's talked about it before. He's like, I don't like pitching in the cold.
Okay.
And I mean, now Atlanta's a lot warmer than Baltimore, man.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
Maybe he doesn't get off to this, like, he also, like, it was his splitter. His splitter is such a good pitch, and he didn't throw it early in the season because of the cold, because of the grip. Warm weather. I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe this could be the Gausman year.
Yeah, I mean, in Atlanta, he was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And it was a small sample size, but 10 starts, 2.87 ERA. You know, it's somebody who has been durable over the past 3 years, too. At least 179 innings in each of his last 3 years. I mean, that's fine. 9K per nine, I think, is a number that he could flirt with. I think he can get back up. Like, I think it was 7-something last season, and it's been hovering around the 8 mark. But, you know, the move away from, I know we touched on this with the AL East, maybe it's not as powerful, some of those ballparks around, but when you get away from Camden Yards, I mean, 34 of his last 55 home runs allowed over the last 2 years have come at home. So he goes to Atlanta, that helps him out, you know, slightly. Better defense behind him.
They have a really good defense.
They have maybe one of the best.
Actually, I was gonna talk about that a little bit with Anibal Sanchez. We'll get into that in a second.
Yeah, I mean, maybe one of the best in baseball. Someone who relatively kind of keeps the ball on the ground despite giving up those home runs. And, you know, I'm just interested in this Atlanta rotation in general. I mean, Newcomb's got some red flags with the walks, but I'm still a believer in him.
Yeah, high strikeout rate. It's hard to give up on a guy like
It's hard to give up on a high prospect.
He also
like
had
that.
I feel like it was a 2-month stretch last season where he was really good.
He was
then the wheels
really good.
Fell off
They fell off in the first part of the season. He was really, really good. The walkouts, he limited the walks, but yeah, there's some red flags with him. But the entire rotation, Soroka's a nice young prospect that I think we'll be talking about this season. Guajajara is another guy that I think we'll be talking about as well this season. So I just want to keep an eye on this entire rotation. Even their closer, like Minter, is somebody that I'm going to have some shares on too. Is Vizcaína deal with a shoulder injury all last year. So again, you know, keeps the ball on the ground. And I just like his landing point. I still think he has some strikeout upside. I don't think he's locked into a 7K per nine guy. I think maybe he sees a few more pitchers or pinch hitters or whatever it is the case going to be for him in Atlanta. But I think he can get up to that 9 mark. And you know, I don't think his ratios are going to be off the charts. I think he could even be a 3 ERA guy, maybe a 3.7 or close to a 4. But
I think there's something to be said too for, you got to give some credit to Atlanta's coaching staff and their pitching coach. Like, they've just been able to really get the best out of a lot of guys. Like, I know we used to give a lot of credence to like, oh, is he going to Pittsburgh?
Yeah.
Amazing. Ray Searage is going to turn this guy's career around, blah, blah, blah.
Lariano effect.
So there's something to be said for a good coaching staff. And like, they've gotten the best out of Fulton Davids, who
I think is phenomenal. I think I'm in on him as well.
And Anibal Sanchez. So I don't really know if it was Anibal Sanchez last season thinking, I've got to do something different. Or I don't know if it was Atlanta that came to him and said, you need to throw your cutter a lot more than you've been throwing it. But for me, when I look at someone like Sanchez, who, I mean, let's be honest, was the butt of a lot of jokes, especially in the DFS community. I remember for the year he was in Detroit,
oh boy,
it was fun to stack against Detroit, because if your stack actually worked and you got to the starter and the starter got pulled after 3 innings, you knew you were going to have 3 innings against Anibal Sanchez coming up after that. Like it was dessert after dessert. It was amazing. So Sanchez was awful. Like, I don't want to sugarcoat it, but
he was bad.
I needed to see, like, it's obviously last year's season was 1 season. He's getting older. There's a lot of things that point in the direction that he might be done, but there was a tangible difference. Like, he went from throwing his cutter 8% of the time to 23% of the time, and it was a really good pitch. Opponents had just a 195 batting average and a 134 isolated power against it last season. So he figured something out. And maybe the same can happen with Gausman. Like, hey, throw your splitter a lot more than you've been throwing it.
Trust this pitch.
And that can kind of work. But for Sanchez, he's going in like the mid 300s, the mid 350s right now. I just think it's too cheap. Like, he's not going to blow you away with the strikeout numbers, although he was up around a strikeout per nine.
Yeah, he was
last season. But his big thing was run suppression. So 16 of his 24 starts last year, 2 earned runs or less, and never allowed more than 4. So he never had that blow-up start that ruined your week in a head-to-head.
That's pretty impressive, actually.
And while he did have a 255 BABIP, which to most people you would go, that seems low, that's probably going to normalize in 2019, it wasn't unjustified that it was a 255 BABIP, because he led the National League in soft contact rate, up at 26.3%. He also had the lowest average exit velocity at 83.7%. So
Anibal
he
Sanchez,
induced
wow, did
really
not know this.
poor contact. So, like, you know, it's easy to say, oh, his BABIP was low, but
yeah. But you look at some of the other numbers,
because he can do that.
Yeah, you can have a low BABIP and still like have a great season.
This is like
because
of
some of the other numbers.
The Kyle Hendricks thing, where you're like his BABIP's low. It's like his
yeah.
defense is historic.
Yeah.
Like these things can correlate sometimes. So, but the one thing I would say, the thing that worries me most about Anibal Sanchez, and you brought it up, Atlanta was the best defensive team in baseball last season by Fangraphs WAR. So that's going to help your BABIP too.
Yeah.
But I did dig into it. The Nationals, where he pitches now, 11th last season. So not like he's going
not an awful
to like Baltimore or something like that. Also, the remaining pieces of last year's team, specifically their infield, really good. Like Rendon and Turner.
Oh, Rendon is
are
phenomenal.
fantastic defensive players. So that's going to help a pitcher like Anibal Sanchez. Yeah. Also, addition by subtraction. We don't know where Bryce Harper's going. He might end up back with the Nationals.
Yeah.
Was not a good outfielder last season.
He's actually one of the worst.
One of the worst.
Like,
and Daniel Murphy's not there anymore. Daniel Murphy's horrendous at playing second base. Daniel Murphy, just to preface it, I know you know this, but defensive runs saved are a counting stat. It's not a ratio. Like the more innings you play, the more runs you either save or don't save.
Yeah.
He somehow was a minus 18 defensive runs saved at second base. He only played 500 innings there.
I was going to say, yeah.
So you stick Brian Dozier, who's not a great second baseman, but
it's an upgrade.
Serviceable second baseman. Yeah. It's an upgrade. So I think there's a lot to like about Sanchez. I think he's a very high floor. Like, if you can get Sanchez, while everyone else is gunning for like upside with their last couple picks, you take Sanchez and just be like, I've got an SP5 out of my SP9 slot.
Right.
He's not going to blow anybody away, but he's perfectly fine.
Yeah, good ratios. And, you know, it was kind of surprising to see that bounce back because I thought he was done. I'll be quite honest with you.
Oh, man, me too. He also had like a scary injury to start that season, and I was like, he might retire.
Yeah, was that a comebacker? Did he
No,
get a comebacker?
he was training before a game, and he like tore his knee when he was going from the infield to the outfield grass. Like I remember it was just like, I was working my DK Live shift. Everyone go download the DK Live app. And someone was like, hey, could you write up Anibal Sanchez being hurt? And I almost was like, why?
What for?
Who cares? Yeah. Why? And then, man
as somebody who, you know, turned it around. I thought he was completely done, but to hear some of those numbers, especially, you know, he didn't even have one blow up start, right? I mean, that's pretty impressive. And you were talking earlier about a team's fifth starter. On a good team, like Washington's still going to be a good team, whether they have Bryce Harper or not. Like, they're still going to be.
Their projected total is 90 wins, I think.
Yeah, I mean, they're still going to score some runs, and somebody who can, you know, maybe fall into double-digit wins.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
So let's wrap this up with a couple guys going outside the top 250. Yep. So still pretty cheap. Tyler Skaggs. I feel like every year there's an Angels pitcher where we're like, man, his numbers are so good. I just wish they could stay healthy. And Skaggs has constantly been one of those guys.
He is. You know, we were talking about Pineda with Tommy John. There's two guys in the Angels rotation that took a leap forward last year. It was Andrew Haney and Tyler Skaggs. And for Haney, he relatively had a season that, you know, he wasn't hurt. Skaggs was still hurt. You know, career highs in starts, 24 innings pitched, 125, which is not a lot. K per 9 was 9.16. His like ERA, these are all career highs, by the way. ERA 4.02. Okay,
but still, like, he's basically American League Rich Hill.
Right. Is somebody that, again, career highs, you know, striker percentage 24, swinging strike percent 11, contact 76. Somebody who I think took a great step forward is, over the years, what I've noticed from Skaggs is the potential has been there, the upside has been there, but he just hasn't been able to put together a full season. Again, I mentioned the Tommy John, but before that, I mean, he had a combined 134 innings pitched in 3 prior years before last season. Like, so to me, looking at 125 innings, that's not a lot. That's not great. It was still a nice positive sign. And what I saw from him, like a tale of 2 seasons, 98 innings in his first half, 28 earned runs, 28 earned runs in the second half in 27 innings.
And it might, like you said, maybe he just runs out of gas.
He had the adductor strain, and I think I want to chalk that up to some of the struggles that he had in the second half, because in the first half of the season, 15 of his first 19 starts, it was 2 runs or fewer. 2 runs or fewer in 15 of 19. Wow. He was very, very dominant. He had a blow-up start against the Red Sox where he allowed 6 runs, and he had another one against the Yankees. He was extremely dominant. He was using a lot of his pitches. He was getting swing and misses. He was limiting his walks. He was keeping the ball on the ground. It was very positive. And then in the second half, he had 2 starts, back-to-back starts, where he allowed 17 runs. So that killed his ERA.
Yeah.
It crushed it. He allowed 10 runs to Tampa, and the very next start, he allowed 7 runs, and then he popped on the DL. And then he missed 3 weeks. He came back, allowed 3 runs, 4 runs, 5 runs, and then went back on the DL, and the season was over. So there is some injury concern, like a lot of these guys like Pineda. There's certainly some concern with Skaggs injury-wise, but I saw some positives from him as somebody, again, who keeps the ball on the ground, and there's a bigger positive sample size than the negative one for me. What's he going to project for innings? Maybe only 150.
Yeah, but
maybe only 150.
To that point, this is a concept that gets thrown around a lot when it comes to fantasy football, just because we so often have this key suspension to deal with at the start of the season. But, you know, the conversation is often, okay, but can I pay this price for 12 games of player X? And it's like, well, while I see that you're only technically going to get 12 games of that guy in particular, it's not like you don't get to start another running back in that slot. Right. If you're drafting someone 275 or whatever Skaggs is, I think it's like 267.
Yeah, it's 267, yeah. SP 72.
Yeah. If you're drafting that guy, if you get 125 innings from that guy, you can find 75 more innings elsewhere. Like I'll take, like I said, with the Rich Hill thing, like Rich Hill, we went into last season, Rich Hill was like SP 30, going off the board like 120, 130. And everyone was just okay. Like, oh yeah, he's only going to pitch 150 innings, but they're going to be 150 really good innings. I'll take that from Skaggs.
Like I said, I think
is it as definite to happen? No.
No, it's not it's not definite. And I mean, again, 125 was the career high, but for me, like 24 striker percentage, that's a solid number.
Yeah.
And the 11 swinging strike percentage is also a solid number. So I want to look at those numbers and look at those positives, and not so much look at the 5 blow-up starts that he had towards the end of the season against, you know, some pretty good teams. Like, those starts are obviously going to happen. The 17 runs in back-to-back outings.
Yeah.
That puts it, before that, Garion, the ERA was around 2.34. I mean, he's not that type of pitcher, but I think he's somebody who can be sub 4.
And like he and Heaney, it's also like they're not coming out of nowhere. Like, these guys had prospect buzz.
Yeah,
like
especially Heaney,
Yeah, but like Skaggs was a huge part of that Angels Diamondbacks deal. Like
well, they had him and then traded him. And then traded back for him with Strumbo.
They clearly liked him.
So they clearly
had to get him back.
Yeah, had to get him back.
So the last guy I want to talk about, Trevor Richards.
I like this call a lot.
Really interesting guy though. Like the funniest thing to me is whenever you go look up Trevor Richards' numbers on Fangraphs, it'll catch your eye. Like, it basically just says like Trevor Richards at the top, right-handed pitcher. And you're like, where's all the other info? Like where he was drafted. And he wasn't drafted. Yeah. He played in the Frontier League.
Not even thought about it.
Like it's nuts that a guy like this, and you know, I keep bringing up Rich Hill, but Rich Hill is obviously the guy you go to when like independent league pitcher shows up
and is dominant.
When you have a pitch like Richards has, his changeup is one of the best changeups in baseball. Like,
absolutely.
And, you know, I so often compare changeup pitchers to Marco Estrada just because it's numbers I can recite on top of my head.
He had one of the best changeups in baseball too for the past couple of years.
But the problem Richards ran into last season was he, like a lot of right-handed changeup pitchers, has a hard time adjusting to right-handed batters because you can't as effectively throw that changeup right on right. And the numbers bear that out. Left-handed batters had a .073 isolated power off his changeup last season. It was up around 200 against right-handed batters. So
it's a pretty big difference.
Maybe Richards is a guy who is more of a DFS player. You look at the opposing lineup and go, hey, does he got 5-6 left-handed batters in it? Trevor Richards is going to be a really good play tonight. Maybe that's all he is.
Yeah.
But at the same time, 27.2% strikeout rate in the second half, and he's got a 25.4% whiff rate on that changeup. So, like I said off the top of this show, for pitchers specifically, when we're talking sleepers, one of the biggest things for me, I mean, strikeout rate is so easy to say, but do they have an out pitch? Do they have a pitch where I can say beyond everything else, the guy can know it's coming and still not hit this pitch? Because that's really, for me, when we're talking about, you know, scrub kind of players, sustainability for strikeout rate, a big part of that is like, do they have an out pitch? He's got an out pitch.
He's got an out pitch.
And he gets to pitch at Marlins Park.
Always a plus.
The reverse half of that is he doesn't get to face the Marlins, which is not great.
Pitch against his own team.
That division, sneaky good.
It is sneaky
aside
good.
from the Marlins.
Yeah, it's on the rise, man. It really is.
So maybe that's a reason to be a little bit tepid.
Yeah.
But what's his ADP? I think it's like 414.
414.
So he's free.
And free. And you know what? I think one of those guys where if you're doing drafts now, get him. And still not saying to avoid him in a couple months, but I think he's somebody that's going to rise up. I think one of those, out of all the guys, actually, I think he's the one.
Ooh, we got a winner.
I really do think he's the one that's you're gonna see, rise up the boards, draft boards. He's very interesting, and I love the second half.
Yeah.
And for me, when I'm looking at some of these pitchers, like you got to look at the splits, and if you look at September and towards into October, sometimes that gets a little shady when you're, who's he going up against?
Yeah.
Are those teams checked out, or did they have the September call-ups, and who's striking out? All that stuff, but. I loved his second half, and you're right about that changeup, man. I think it's one of the best in baseball. You got that out pitch; it's phenomenal. Chris
Meaney, also one of the best in baseball. You can follow all his work at Fantrax.
I don't know about that.
And on The Athletic. Man, you write for The Athletic.
That's true.
That's legit.
I'll take that.
It's pretty legit.
Yes.
Anything you want to promote before we get out of here?
Yeah, so The Athletic, you mentioned, we'll have the fantasy baseball draft guide on there. We'll have all kinds of articles, of course. That'll be out, I think, first week in February. We'll have some rankings there. And then Fantrax, just, keeping up to date in there. We got rankings already, sleepers, busts, all that good stuff. And it's only January, so...
a lot of
fact
content
that we
to come.
have some content there is good, is a good start. And yeah, we'll continue to have it throughout the year. Yeah.
So
Thanks for having me.
No problem, man. Make sure you tune back in to the Pat Mayo Experience featuring Garion Thorne as guest host. We are going to break down. We're not leaving you hanging, just giving you sleepers for pitchers. Obviously, we're going to give you positional player sleepers as well. So make sure to find that show. Also, Chris and I discuss the top 20 ADP as we stand here in mid-January, so check that out. Also want to remind you guys, if you want to get into a DK draw for $20 DK, it's very simple. First, hit the like button for this video, which is easy. Come on, we just gave you a ton of valuable content. And then in the comment section below, leave your DK handle. That's probably the most important part. We need to know who you are. Tell us who your favorite sleeper pitcher is this season. Doesn't even have to be one of the 10 guys we just talked about. School us. Break the internet with your hot take about who your sleeper pitcher for 2019 is going to be. Chris already said the winner for this show is Trevor Richards. So
that's going to be the answer.
Maybe everyone just put Trevor Richards. It'll be fine. Either way, please do that. We really appreciate it. And please come back again on the Pat Mayo Experience. We'll catch you then.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!